There are a number of underlying issues that make up the Taiwan problem, and as such, these can make it seem complex, and as a consequence make the problem difficult to resolve. In this short video documentary, we will be discussing what we believe are the main underlying issues, stating a case for each before drawing to a conclusion that the issue is difficult to solve due to the differences in policies and opinion between the People's Republic of China and Taiwan. Ever since the cessation of combat during the Chinese Civil War in 1950, the history of this conflict played an ever-expanding role in the relationship between the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China. One of the ways this manifested was the role of the Cold War and how it influenced the American position on the issue, with Nancy Burtkoff Tucker using the American policy as the most influential factor that defined the relationship between the two states. This is highlighted by the support Taiwan received in the immediate aftermath of the Korean War in 1953, due to American fear of communism in the region and the American view of all communist states being Soviet puppets. However, with the Shanghai Communique, John Franklin Copper highlights that the American position was truly a position of containment for the Soviet Union rather than China. This warming of relations between the United States and the People's Republic of China was troubling for the Taiwanese government, for it meant that they had no official support from their biggest ally. Even so, the American Congress was not willing to abandon Taipei, and in 1978 they signed the Taiwan Relations Act. As such, this led to the three no's policy within Taiwan, which were no contact, no compromise, and no negotiation. According to Andrew J. Nathan, the three no policy is the main example of how the history will influence the issue today, for it was even a tool used by the administration of President Clinton as a method to reassure the Taiwanese government that it had the backing of the United States. However, it was also used as a tactic to counter China's influence in the region, a method to remind the Chinese government that the issue still exists to this day. Taiwan is positioned in a rather strategic location between the Far East and the Southeast of Asia. Its positioning makes it an ideal acquisition to China should they ever acquire it, as it is one of the islands which essentially boxes in China and has previously had attempts to be colonised by the Dutch and Spanish. The history of Taiwan as a colony during 1630 and 1945 was based heavily on economics. If we look at Taiwan's economy from 1950 onwards, we can see how it has developed to become the fifth largest economy in Asia. In the 1950s, the Republic of China's government retreated to Taiwan after losing the Chinese Civil War, and carried out land reform policies such as the 375 Rent Reduction Act, which contributed to Taiwan's economic growth. In the 1960s, the agrarian economy was then replaced with a light industry, as small and medium businesses began to form, and we can see that from 1966 to around the 1980s, the economy in Taiwan began to stabilise as the 10 major construction projects laid a foundation in further economic developments. It is from the 1980s onwards that we really see a boom in the Taiwanese economy, as government-owned corporations were then privatised. However, Taiwan did face economic struggles during the mass destruction of World War II and the time of the Chinese hyperinflation of the 1940s. Its economy was also affected when there was an increase in population from the Kuomintang migration from mainland China. Currently, its position means that it is automatically a destination for trade between the Western powers and the East Asia states, meaning that it has the 19th largest world purchasing power, and is now the 5th largest economy in Asia. The political dynamic that is in place within Taiwan is one of the issues that makes the Taiwan problem so difficult to resolve, for the majority of the state's existence, there has been a single-party system, led by the Kuomintang, hereby referred to as the KMT, whom support links with the People's Republic of China. However, with the rise of the Democratic Progressive Party, and the party gaining enough support to be the largest party holding the positions of President and Premier, this has changed the political dynamic of the country, hence why it is adding to the issues that are included within the Taiwan problem. There are two opposing parties who both want Taiwan to be a state of its own. However, both sides also want different types of relationships with China. Having these parties in place, however, does allow there to be a semblance of Taiwanese identity, as citizens are using the party differentiations to come up with an idea of what it means to be Taiwanese. Any form of unification will remove this completely. The state has run itself through the means of the 1947 constitution that was written to represent the entirety of China, including the PRC. And even though the amendments to this constitution, it is obvious that the state wishes that it maintain a relationship with the mainland, which in itself causes there to be a cause of tension. Leaders of both the KMT and DPP are now shaping policies for the country past the initial constitution. However, this faces its own problems due to a reliance upon each of their wants, relating back to what it is to be Taiwanese. Taiwan's international status does not satisfy anyone with its anxious conciliation that currently stands since the Taiwan Relations Act 1978. The Act came into force with the intent of opposing communism in addition to aiding the spread of globalization and capitalism. The Act declares that if any outside nation were to attack Taiwan, the US should come to its defense. So with that being said, the US are obligated to be concerned and give Taiwan the means by which it can defend itself. But the US are not obligated to come to Taiwan's direct rescue if their force for independence were to push China over the edge. If the US were to come to Taiwan's rescue, this would jeopardize the US-Sino relations, which the US are trying to maintain. The Chinese fear Taiwan's real effort towards independence, and many scholars fear that the Chinese have a short timetable that's becoming even shorter. Perhaps Xi Jinping's primary concern would not be regaining Taiwan, is that he cannot and will not lose Taiwan. If the former, this will reflect horribly on the Chinese leader and his supporters. The Taiwanese people have a perfectly comprehensible desire to have autonomy, independence and identity. This is an understandable impulse. However, big powers do not tend to recognise this impulse since they do not have to go through the same struggle. So is it worthwhile for Taiwan to have an everlasting conflictual relationship with China's enormous population just 90 miles out in the sea that they happen to be economically integrated with? Well, in David Labden's interview with Frontline, he responded with, I quote, "The PRC is Taiwan's natural economic hinterland, so there are a lot of things that intervene beyond the subjective desire of people to be independent." Chinese policies which border around Taiwan are set to bring about unity between the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China. The United States of America usually has its part in the involvement of the policies which are created by China in relation to Taiwan. A good example of this is the Joint Communique, which basically states that the United States government is in clear understanding of the ideology of the Chinese, which clarifies how there is but one China and Taiwan as part of China. The major policies made by China are set to unite the ROC and PROC. One of the most known policies is the One China policy. From the perspectives of China and Taiwan respectively, it is noted that Taiwan does not recognise the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China as one. As for the One China policy, it sets out looking quite similar to the One China principle, which are known to be two different things entirely. The principle basically states that both the ROC and the PRC agree that there is one China, but have different views as to who the dominant and legitimate government is, and different views as to the meaning of one China. Looking at the position of Taiwan in the policy, most critics argue that the position of Taiwan is seen as threatening to the Chinese, and if Taiwan gains independence, it could be seen as threatening to the Chinese government. If this occurs, could China possibly be overthrown by its citizens? It seems that the underlying issue with public opinion on the Taiwan problem is that the Taiwanese are all too happy to sit on the fence and stick with the status quo. Although they may value their independence from China, when it comes to taking action, they are holding themselves back for fear of higher tensions, increasing the likelihood of China taking military action. On the other hand, they are not willing to succumb to the perils that unifying with a communist country entail. For the public, the Taiwan problem is about whether or not they wish to seek full independence from mainland China, or unification. Public opinion is therefore divided around three main choices. The public are therefore stagnated on the issue of Taiwan, with the majority, 56%, wishing to stay with how the situation currently stands in Taiwan. Out of this immobility has grown a third resistance, separate from the two main political parties. These are younger, educated voters who are wishing to challenge the status quo and seek independence from the mainland. They go by the name of the Sunflower Movement. One of the key advancements they wish to see is an increase in the ability of Taiwan to hold referendums on issues surrounding sovereignty and independence, rather than the growth of trade deals with China. Despite this, Taiwan also has young voters within this group who want to see more agreements, links and policy between the two, due to the greater opportunities for work which China offers over Taiwan. To overcome this problem, the government needs to itself challenge the status quo and to rest assured many of the concerns the public has with both sides of the coin before the Taiwan problem can be solved. In conclusion, the so-called Taiwan problem is not an easy one to overcome, as it has a lot of historical complexities that have escalated into the current day. The foreign policies and politics of the nations are reflective of the difficulties faced by both nations due to the underlying tensions created by the Chinese Civil War and the situation Taiwan finds itself politically and economically. These underlying conditions prove vital in understanding the conflict, and as such it can be seen that these prove to be the greatest challenge to the eventual solution of the Taiwan problem.